Welcome back to another episode of Daily Departed. In our last episode, we learned about Rebecca Booth, who is my grandfather's mother. We also learned about her parents and her siblings. And today we're picking up the story where Clarence Leslie is born. His father is not named on the birth certificate. And we are watching to see where Rebecca ends up next. So this is my grandfather, Clarence Leslie Booth, and I knew him for just 8 short. Welcome back to another episode of Daily Departed. In our last episode, we learned about Rebecca Booth, who is my grandfather's mother. We also learned about her parents and her siblings. And today we're picking up the story where Clarence Leslie is born. His father is not named on the birth certificate. And we are watching to see where Rebecca ends up next. So this is my grandfather, Clarence Leslie Booth, and I knew him for just 8 short years of my life. He died when I was 8 years old, and I just knew a little bit about him, but he was such a gentle and kind person that when I started to look about my family history, I knew that I had to learn more. So at this point, the year is 1912. Rebecca Booth is no longer in Jamaica, and she pops up on the other side of the Caribbean in Panama with her sister Rosa. Now, during this time, it is important to note that the Panama Canal was taken over from the French to the English, or actually to America, who is now building the canal. They could not find sufficient workers from America to come, and so they had to turn reluctantly to the Caribbean. They opened up mostly to Barbados and to a lesser extent Jamaica. So when that call went out, many people from the Caribbean went, and my foreparents were some of them. So here we see a marriage certificate written by hand, and it's between Patrick Daisley and Rebecca Booth. Now it is my mother, shout out to her, who found her grandmother in Panama, because much of my search I was doing in Jamaica, but she found her grandmother in Panama. And here Rebecca is marrying Patrick on the 28th of July in 1912. And I looked at this and looked at this and I looked at this and looked at this. And then one day as I was inspecting it, I saw under the witness section, Rosa McIntosh. And if you can remember from episode 1, Rosa Matilda McIntosh would have been Rebecca's older sister. So it seems that after she got pregnant, after the father was no longer in the picture, someone thought it was a good idea for them to go to Panama to look for work. And ultimately, Rosa arrives, and so does Rebecca. And Rebecca finds someone to marry in Patrick Daisley. So whatever happened to my grandfather's mother, she got married in Panama, and her older sister was the witness. Why? What? I have so many questions. What was that conversation like? What was the conversation like that prompted you to leave? Did you promise to come back? When your sister stood in as the witness for your marriage, what did she say to you? Did you want to do it? Did she talk you into it? So many questions, some of which will remain unanswered. So now she's married. She has a young child back at home with 2 teeth in the top, 2 teeth in the bottom. I guess it stands to reason that her siblings or her parents looked after Clarence Leslie. And in December of that year, one of her siblings does arrive in Panama, and his name is Hubert. Yes, the same Hubert who witnessed the birth of Clarence Leslie 2 years prior. Okay, so this is what they were coming to build. This here is the Panama Canal, and they were coming to help with the excavation of the land and to build this canal that would allow for ships to cut through and shave time off their voyage, which ultimately would lead to more riches for those who were able to bring their goods and services to this side of the world. And this was a find. This part right here was one of the highlights of the finds because it came with a picture. The Panama Canal application for photo metal check employees. And it was difficult because it was just H. Booth. But as we continue to search and as we continue to look, we realized this was Hubert Booth, who is also my grandfather's uncle. He came over in 1912, December, into the colon, Panama, This would have been U.S. territory. They were paying him a whopping 15 cents per hour. He was a laborer, and he returns. He looks like he returns there on more than one occasion. And in this occasion, he's employed effective July 1918. If we can remember, World War I breaks out in 1914 to 1918. It ends. So I would have to double check when exactly the World War ends. But in July of 1918, he is in service in Panama. And here is a picture of I suppose it would be my great uncle, Hubert Booth. It says that he has a small scar under his right eye. He was 5'10". My grandfather was quite tall and 150 pounds. He had a slender build. Israel is married a complexion we can see here. Hubert Rebecca did say it seems that his wife was in Jamaica. So records indicate that Hubert eventually returned to Jamaica. Again, he was married to a woman named Elsie Williams, and they had 2 sons, one of which died in 1917. His name was Claude, and he died at 8 months old. Here is Claude's death certificate. And so I say that because Hubert is seen in Panama in 1918, but in 1917, his son dies. And that may indicate that he went back and forth. And given that Rebecca married a man who was stationed to a certain degree in Panama, she may not have had the ability to go or the desire, I don't know, to go back and forth. So many questions. But here's the death certificate of one of the children that Elsie and Hubert shared. Later on, he has another child, Henry Wellesley Booth. And what strikes me about him is that Hubert gives the second son the middle name of his nephew, which he would have been present at the birth. He would have known the story and the trials that this young man, at this time 13, would have went through, and he shares the name Wellesley and gives it to his own son. And here's Henry's birth certificate, and we see Elsie is the mother and Hubert Booth is the father, and it's in Waterworks, Westmoreland, and these are the people, and the story is continuing. During his younger years, Hubert remains close to his nephew, watching over him in a way, and he actually is thought to have taught him the craft of shoemaking. This is how my grandfather learns to become a cobbler from his uncle, Hubert. Unfortunately, in December of 1966, at the age of 79, Hubert dies of tongue cancer. Again, similar area, Waterworks, Westmoreland. He's still married. It's December now. He is older, much older. He's a shoemaker. His sister, Rebecca, is still in Panama, and you need to stay tuned to find out what became of Rebecca in Panama and what happens with Clarence Wellesley after his uncle dies. Stay tuned.